Who is the Winterfell murderer? There are a string of murders there in A Dance with Dragons with a lot of potential suspects, so who done it? Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to Deep Geek. If you like theories, background, history and lore about A Song of Ice and Fire, The Lord of the Rings and The Witcher, then this is the place for you. Welcome. In A Dance with Dragons, as the snow falls heavily and Roose Bolton holds sway over a rather rebellious group of lords, ladies and their various retinues and armies, a series of murders takes place. Depending on how you count them, there are 6 different murders, including a double murder. A soldier from House Riswell, Aenys Frey's squire, a crossbowman from House Flint, 2 grooms, Yellow Dick, a House Bolton man-at-arms, and Little Walder Frey, grandson of Lord Walder. It's quite a random collection of victims at first sight. The murders take place in relatively quick succession, and although at first they are written off as simple accidents, by the time we get to the last 2 it is very obvious that these are definitely murders. George R. R. Martin has written us a murder mystery. And although Roose Bolton tries to downplay it a bit at first, telling people not to talk about the discovery of one body, it becomes an issue of huge contention among his lords. We're told that they start openly quarrelling in the Great Hall. Accusations start to fly. A reward of a golden dragon is offered to anyone who can identify the killer. Theon, through whose eyes we see all this, is accused but quickly acquitted because, as Barbary Dustin points out, he's in no physical condition to attack anyone, and as Roose Bolton concludes, he wouldn't be able to break his conditioning anyway to attack someone like Yellow Dick, who was so close to Ramsay. Theon himself thinks that perhaps the bard Abel's spearwives did it, leading to this exchange with one of them, Rowan. "You killed a boy as well," says Theon. "That was not us, I told you. Words are wind. They're no better than me. We're just the same. You killed the others. Why not him? Yellow Dick stank as bad as you. A pig of a man. And Little Walder was a piglet. Killing him brought the Freys and Mandleys to dagger points. That was cunning. You... Not us." Rowan grabbed him by the throat and shoved him back against the barracks wall, her face an inch from his. "Say it again, and I will rip your lying tongue out, Kinslayer." So they deny it, or at least they deny that one murder. Back in the Great Hall, the Freys accuse the Mandleys, and the Mandleys accuse... well, you get the idea. Everyone was at each other's throats over this, and no one seemed to know who had been doing it. The situation gets so bad that Roose Bolton resorts to sending the Freys and Mandleys out of the castle into the snow, ostensibly to fight Stannis' army a few days away, but really also to stop them killing each other inside Winterfell. And we still come no closer to finding the identity of the true murderer. And we have to say, George R. R. Martin has made things quite difficult for us. We aren't witness to any of the murders, only hear about the crime scenes briefly and second-hand in most cases, and some of them genuinely could be accidents. Stone ramparts can be very slippery, and stables do sometimes collapse under the weight of snow on their roofs. And with visibility down to less than a metre and snow piling deep, people could be hiding anywhere. And added to all that, we see all this through Theon's eyes, and he is not the most reliable of witnesses at this point. Freed from Ramsay's direct control, he is starting to slowly come back to his Theon identity, but it is a long road. So, taking all that into account, who done it? Let's work through the deaths backwards, starting at the most recent, Little Walder, because I think that is one of the more clean-cut. His is the death that sparks the confrontation between the Mandleys and the Freys, and the last one we hear of before Theon makes his escape. Little Walder, who was actually quite big, as opposed to Big Walder, who we'll talk about in a moment, who was actually quite small, was found buried in a snowbank by the first keep. He had been butchered like a pig, apparently, so no possibility of an accident here. Big Walder, his cousin, seems to know the most about it. Little Walder had gone out looking for a House Mandley man who owed him money, he says. We don't get a chance to hear more, because Lord Manderley then insults the Freys attack the Manderleys, and Roose Bolton orders them all out. But hang on, because we're told that when he walks into the room, that Big Walder's chest and hands and cloak are spattered with blood. From Little Walder, presumably, but we're told that the killer hid the body in a snowdrift, and now all the blood was frozen, so how did all that blood get on him? Unless he was there while the blood was still warm. Very suspicious. Why might he kill his cousin? because he wants to be the Lord of the Crossing. He says so many times, and little Walder is ahead of him in the line of succession. And he also has grown to rather dislike his cousin. Little Walder had fallen in with Ramsay and become more and more cruel, and Big Walder had very much distanced himself from that. Might he have confronted him and killed him, and then made up that story about little Walder going out alone to look for someone who owed him money? It seems very possible. Although this is the last of the murders, it actually seems a lot like a standalone crime. Big Walder killing his cousin and rather vaguely blaming it on the easy target, the Manderleys, without much evidence, knowing that the rest of the phrase would rally around him in that accusation, makes sense. So let's move on to Yellow Dick. This is another of Ramsay Bolton's cronies, and the murder that convinced everyone that there was a murderer about. It's rather gruesome, so feel free to close your ears for a second, but his genitals had been cut off and stuffed into his mouth, which clearly implies a more personal reason behind the killing. Interestingly, Theon twice accuses Abel's spearwives of this particular murder, and both times they don't exactly deny it. Holly laughs at his suggestion and rhetorically asks, "How could it be us? We're women." Which seems quite a weak excuse for a wildling spearwife. Then Rowan replies to his later accusation by simply saying that Yellow Dick was a pig of a man. Also not much of a denial, particularly in contrast to Rowan grabbing Theon by the throat and shoving him against the wall when he suggested she had killed little Walder. Why might they do it? Well, they are on a mission to get the fake Arya Stark out of Winterfell, and she is confined to Ramsay's chambers, so they need to get access there. Yellow Dick is one of the few people who does seem to have access at times, so Rowan, and it does seem to have been Rowan, seducing him away to somewhere quiet to get some information or a key from him, or perhaps even get him to help them, seems quite likely. But Yellow Dick was not a nice man. We're repeatedly told and shown this. He will surely have tried to take advantage of her, and, well, she called him a pig afterwards, and seemed quite angry about him. We can probably join up some of the dots here without knowing exactly what happened. We do know that he ended up dead, and the spearwives were still trying to find a way to fake Arya. So let's move on to that collapsed stable, and those 2 grooms and 26 horses. The situation there was that Ramsay had burnt down the Winterfell stables when he had sacked the castle earlier in the story, so Roose orders new ones constructed. This was very important. It was extremely cold outside, and the horses needed shelter. A medieval army is very reliant on its horses. Then, one day, those new stables collapse. Of course, this could have been a straightforward accident, and was initially assumed to be one. The stables were hastily constructed, there was a lot of snow weighing down on the roof. Yes, maybe this one is an accident. But Roose Bolton doesn't seem the type to tolerate poor workmanship, and destruction of the stables would be one of the main targets if you wanted to disrupt the Boltons' war machine, and there are plenty of people wanting to do that. I'll do a full video soon on the Great Northern Conspiracy. Basically, lots of northern houses remain loyal to the Starks despite being forced to submit to the Boltons, and they're planning things. At the heart of this is House Manderley, the richest and strongest other house in the north, but in truth, it could have been a lot of different people. There are plenty of northerners in Winterfell with uncertain loyalties. But I wonder if we actually get a clue with what happens in the preceding murder. A crossbowman from House Flint is found dead in those same stables the day before they collapse. He has a broken skull which is written off as having been from a horse kicking him, but Theon thinks it looks more like he'd been hit by a club. As well as the suspicious timing, you do have to wonder why he was even there. These seem to be Bolton stables, not House Flint's, and he was a crossbowman, not a groom or stable hand or knight, so there doesn't seem to have been an obvious reason for him to be there at all. To confuse things a bit more, there are actually a few different House Flints in the north. House Flint of the Mountains are definitely Stark loyalists, whereas House Flint of Flint's Fingers swore fealty to the Boltons. We know not whether that was gladly or grudgingly, but Theon lists the Flints in Winterfell at that time as being of uncertain loyalty, like the Manderleys. So it seems at least possible that the crossbowman was there for nefarious reasons connected to the collapse of the stables the next day. Maybe he was part of a team to sabotage the stables and died accidentally, or he was discovered and the others fled, or was going to give them away. Whatever the details of how it happened, it is more than beyond suspicious that someone who probably shouldn't have been in those stables died in them the night before those stables collapsed. As for who was behind that sabotage, other than probably House Flint, perhaps it was the Spearwives again, though their focus seems more on getting access to fake Arya than causing problems for House Bolton, so if I had to guess it would be the Manderleys, or that mysterious hooded man that Theon ran into and clearly recognised. Then, going back a little further in time, we get to Aenys Frey's squire. He was found naked in the Lich-yard. Again, this seems like the Spearwives. I've said that they are focused on getting fake Arya out, which they are, but they also seem to have another objective: get access to the Winterfell crypts, which is probably worth another video on its own, but at the very least those crypts would offer some shelter and a place to hide in, when, as appears very likely, it all kicks off in Winterfell, or perhaps for when they get hold of fake Arya. Mance Rayder, in disguise as Abel the Bard, probably also has other reasons, but the entrance to the crypt is hidden under many feet of snow, and most of the people of Winterfell at the time don't actually know Winterfell all that well, so nobody seems to know where it is. Theon knows, and Holly, one of the Spearwives, tries to seduce the information out of him. "These crypts, where are they, my lord? Would you show me?" Holly toyed with the strand of her hair, coiling it around her little finger. "Deep and dark, they say. A good place for touching. All the dead kings watching." Theon, convinced that this is some ploy, says no and goes away, but the very next morning we read this. "Sir Aenys Frey's grizzled squire was found naked and dead of exposure in the old castle Lich-yard, his face so obscured by hoarfrost that he appeared to be wearing a mask." So Holly was going around Winterfell trying to seduce someone who might know where the entrance to the crypts is. Then the next morning, someone turns up dead and naked in the Lich-yard, just around the corner from that very entrance. Very suspicious. Might Aenys Frey's squire have known where the crypts were? Possibly, but he isn't even a named character, so doesn't seem very important. And Aenys dismisses his death as probably him just getting drunk and wandering out into the storm, which probably says a bit about the character of the man. Anyway, he might have fallen for Holly's seductions. We're told that all the men like her, and pretended to know where the crypts were, and gone to the Lich-yard with her, which seems like a reasonable place to start looking. But after he got naked, again we can probably read between the lines a bit there, she decided to kill him. She wouldn't want anyone knowing she was looking for the crypts after all. Which brings us to the first of the murders, or perhaps this one really was an accident. It was a man-at-arms from House Riswell. He was found at the foot of the inner curtain wall, where he had clearly fallen. Roger Riswell swiftly asserts that he was a drunkard and had probably just been urinating from the wall and slipped, which sounds reasonable enough. It was very slippery around there. But Theon thinks to himself that it is weird that someone who wasn't supposed to be guarding the walls would climb all the way up there just to relieve himself. A fair point. So why was he up there? House Riswell were one of the first to bend the knee to the Boltons, but Theon lists them among those of uncertain loyalty in his mind, so perhaps this is actually a Stark loyalist. Why might a Stark loyalist be on top of the walls of Winterfell? Well, there are a lot of reasons. Perhaps to signal to those other Stark loyalists outside, for there are quite a few of them hiding outside, and there certainly seems to be a lot of communication going on. Horns blowing outside, cryptic snowmen being built inside. Yes, I'll cover that in the other video about the Great Northern Conspiracy. Cryptic snowmen are fascinating. Or perhaps they could be there to help someone get in. Theon scaled those walls to get in when he attacked Winterfell, and with the hooded man we certainly seem to have a candidate for someone very recently arrived in Winterfell, and very likely a Stark loyalist. To be honest, this first death is the one where we are furthest from a clear explanation. I suspect that the most likely answer is that this was just an accident in the dark on slippery, unfamiliar ramparts while undertaking some Stark loyalist business, but let me know if you've got a better idea on this or on any of the other deaths in the comment section below. So, who done it? Lots of different people. Some trying to undermine Roose Bolton, others on missions of their own, and at least one more where they were just taking advantage of the snowy conditions and the panic about there being a murderer on the loose to further their own ambitions. As a complete aside, there is an echo here of Jack and Hagar's murders in Harrenhal in A Clash of Kings. There are the references to the ghost of Winterfell, or Harrenhal, respectively, the assumption that they were accidents initially. The first death is someone falling from a rampart and then having their face chewed off by a dog, which is a combination of Jaqen's first 2 kills, and so on. That's not me suggesting the Faceless Men had anything to do with these murders, by the way. Instead, it's probably just George R.R. Martin hinting when those first couple of deaths are announced that they weren't just accidents. Anyway, the end result of all this is the weakening of Roose Bolton's hold on Winterfell, and the turning of his rather volatile coalition against each other, which led him to sending the Freys and the Manderleys out to face Stannis, which will have big implications for the opening chapters of The Winds of Winter. For now, the chaos and accusation throwing in Winterfell fits the rather muddled state of our brief murder investigation. There is no one murderer. Quite possibly, all were committed by completely different people for completely different reasons. Perhaps the first was just an accident. Perhaps Holly killed Aenys Frey's squire trying to find the entrance to the crypts. Perhaps the Flint crossbowman died sabotaging the stables. Yellow Dick was killed by Rowan trying to get access to fake Arya, and Little Walder by Big Walder just because. Perhaps there is no one murderer in Winterfell, but a whole messy, volatile situation where everyone is trying to kill everyone else. Who done it? Everyone done it. If you'd like to see more A Song of Ice and Fire videos like this, there's a link to my playlist on the left of your screen now. Or to support this channel, thank you. There's a link to my Patreon page on the right of your screen. Thanks for watching. That's all for this time. I'll see you again soon.